Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another week of some of our live shows. So, thank you so much for tuning in. We are streaming this one across pretty much all platforms, actually. I can see we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we are on X, Getter, Rumble. So, wherever you are, anyway, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We've got a great returning guest on tonight, and we've got a lot of stuff we need to get through. So, I just before we go on into the topic of chemtrails and carbon capture and the whole climate thing, there is a breaking story in the UK that's just happened in the last hour or so. You may have seen it. I'm being careful about what I say here, by the way, but there has been an incident in the centre of Liverpool. Today, there was, as you know, Liverpool won the Premier League title, and so there was a victory parade. Don't want to show it. Don't want to show it. There was a victory parade going through Liverpool city centre, and it appears that a car was driven into the crowd, and it appears that there are casualties. And I don't want to go much beyond that because speculation sometimes in the immediate aftermath of these things can be a bit dodgy, but it doesn't look good. I've seen the videos. Some videos are there. You can check them out on my timeline, and I'm sure elsewhere on X. I know that we're being restricted in what we can say at the moment on social media about this. Maybe that's a good thing because, as I said, I suggest there may be fatalities. So we'll wait to get all that information, and then once we've got the facts, we'll be able to come back to you with that. So just to make you aware of that anyway, it's a kind of a day of celebration in Liverpool city centre turns into something very, very different, and we need to understand the details surrounding it. So anyways, just to make you aware of that. As I say, there's certain restrictions in what can be said. So I'll just leave it like that for now, but we will return to the subject. I do remember a day last July, the end of July 2024, when another incident happened in another English city, and speculation sometimes can be counterproductive. So let's just wait to see. So anyway, having said all of that, rather than looking down, let's look up to the skies, shall we? Let's look up to the very clouds and the things that are in the firmament, so to speak. And I want to chat to you about something which is I've been wanting to talk about for some time with a great guest. He's and actually I'll just bring him in now. It's our great friend of the show, Gregory Wrightstone. I'm sure you remember Gregory from a while back. Hi, Gregory. Welcome back.
Oh, good to be on with you, David. Great to be
Yeah, no,
back.
it's great to have you back. Great to see you, Gregory. I enjoyed our last chat. And we have, as I say, the main thing I want to chat about is we'll talk about chemtrails, right? But before I get to chemtrails, I'm really interested in this carbon capture stuff because our government's announced like a 20 billion or a 40 billion investment on a couple of carbon capture what storage is it, Greg? I'm not. They build storage, I think, or machines to capture the carbon,
Yeah,
and yeah,
there's two parts of this. First, you have the capture, where you capture it. Then, once you've captured it, what do you do with it?
sure,
And
yeah,
in the past, CO2 or carbon dioxide is what they're
yeah,
going after. There have been uses for it with dry ice, for example, is
yes,
frozen carbon dioxide. But of
yep,
course, putting into dry ice, it sublimates and goes back into CO2. Another usage in the
yeah,
past has been for oil fields, where we use tertiary and secondary recoveries. They pump the carbon dioxide in the oil into the oil field, and it's miscible or in the oil and actually helps the production. But again, that doesn't store it. Some of it remains in the rocks, but most of it comes up with the oil and
yeah,
back to the
right,
atmosphere.
yep,
What you need is some place to put it up that'll lock it up forever. And a lot of the places they do this is underground storage. And
yes,
these are highly permeable, highly porous rocks. They might have a brine or salt water in them now, and they just pump the CO2 into those. And these are usually 6, 8, 10,000 feet below the surface. And
mm,
it's pretty, it it's not dangerous per se. They've been storing natural gas for a long time, but carbon dioxide tends to have brittle, makes steel brittle, and so
Yes.
the ruptures are more likely using carbon dioxide. Um, and so that's one of the problems is what do you do with it? Some people have talked about salt caverns that have been mined out, putting it there. That's probably not a very good solution. But the question is, that's the capture. The capture part is what we want to talk about.
Yeah.
And I just wrote a commentary, and I said it was expensive, uh, completely mindless, and it's harmful. It's harmful. It won't do anything to solve a non-existent problem. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
so let's talk about expensive. I had a fellow, Dr. Byron Sapoyan, who was a PhD in chemical engineering, that had written a number of papers, talked to conferences about carbon capture. He was somewhat of an expert on it. And then he read our paper, Challenging Net Zero, written by Dr.
Mm.
Happer, Dr. Lindzen, and myself. And it opened his eyes. He was in the carbon capture business. He said, "I'm working for the wrong side. I'm promoting
Yeah.
removing this hugely beneficial." And he called me, wanted a job. And I said, no, I'm not going to hire somebody from the carbon capture industry. And he kept
No.
calling. And finally he says, I really want to come work for you. I've quit my job. And so he realized that he was on the wrong side of this story. Like he says, he was working for Emperor Palpatine. He wanted to come work for Luke. He wanted to come work for Luke
Yeah. You're coming to get.
Skywalker.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hired him, and so now he's doing work with us. He's and so what he did, his most recent report, since he is somewhat of an expert, he looked at it. We looked really at the state of Wyoming because that's a large coal production and coal electricity generation area. And we looked at if you take a coal mine
Yeah.
and put carbon capture technology on that, it costs you just a little under, let's just say $1 billion, just slightly under. So cost, it's very expensive to do this. And
Mm.
the economics wouldn't support that, but it's very expensive. Plus, it uses 24% of the electricity generated to capture the carbon. And the little bit of CO2 that would be captured has an incredibly small effect on any warming of the earth. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's just beyond measurement.
Mm.
And so it's harmful too, because we know for a fact that CO2 is driving huge increases in crop production,
Yes, that's right.
in
Yeah.
agricultural productivity. If we reduce that, what does that mean? That means that we will have less crop productivity. That's harmful. That's bad. We should be encouraging more CO2 in the atmosphere
Great.
in
Yeah.
order to grow more crops. And the other thing too is we talked last time about the huge benefits that we've seen throughout human history
Mhm.
during the very warm periods.
Yes.
Warming has always been correlated to huge benefits to the human condition. And it's the cold periods that were horrific. So they get it backwards, completely backwards. So
Yeah.
this carbon capture and storage is, I don't know about the UK where they would store it. If you have the right rock, you have to have the right rocks to
Well,
do
it's
it.
fun. It's funny, Gregory, because I believe the two locations in the UK where they've identified and they're going to store. It's based up in the northwest, which is like Manchester, Liverpool, I believe. In fact, our producer may have one near him because I think that's one of the two locations. But the other thing, Gregory, that I'd been reading was that in Iceland. Iceland have been getting into this carbon capture stuff over the last 4 years, and I was reading that it made me laugh actually. The costs of the machinery that they use to capture the so-called carbon actually result in net more carbon than they capture at a colossal cost as well, by the way. And the only thing is, I'm thinking, well, maybe that's good at one level because we're getting more CO2. But the intent of the Icelandic government was to try and capture the carbon. But all they've done is, I think, made finance. It's economic. As you mentioned, the economics. The economics just don't make sense at
Oh, not
all.
at all. The only way this would make sense is if it actually worked and that we were heading into a climate crisis, that CO2 was causing some kind of a crisis.
Yes.
But we've talked, there is no evidence that all of the evidence we look at by almost every metric we look at, there is no climate crisis now, has been, or in the future. And all we see going forward are huge benefits, and mainly to the
Yeah.
ecosystems.
Oh, I agree. But I mean, actually, just before we came on air, Gregory, I was watching a program on TV about the Amazon. It's about the Amazon, and it was nice. Some really good photography and imagery and stuff. And there's always the bit you can guarantee there'll be a bit in it where they said, yeah, but we have to remember that even in the Amazon, the dry seasons are getting drier. The actual things they said, the dry season's getting drier, the wet season's getting wetter, and oh, isn't it awful? And isn't it, man-made global climate change? I mean, they can't resist it. They have to go for this kind of garbage.
Yeah, they have to establish a climate of fear, and they need
Correct.
to silence people
Yeah.
like me and my colleagues at the CO2 Coalition, because
Yes.
we provide a compelling fact-based narrative that pushes back against this notion of man-made catastrophic warming. It's just not happening, and we
Mm.
see. I haven't taken a good look at the UK in terms of the long-term records. Well, we have the longest thermometer-based temperature record available is the Central England temperature
Yeah, it
record,
is. Yeah, that's right.
because
Yeah.
I believe it goes back to 1659,
Correct.
and so
Yeah.
it shows that we've had more than 300 years of warming, that's in this warming trend. Of course, the
Mhm.
first 250 years of that, we weren't adding CO2. So the first 250 years of this warming
That's
had to
right.
be entirely naturally
Yeah.
driven. But they're
Yeah.
saying, oh no, but that's all changed. We're adding CO2 and that's causing the warming. Well, what caused it before we started adding CO2? Ask yourself that. And I,
But it's
Mhm.
because Gregory, they pick their dates so carefully, don't they? I mean, it's the way they set it up to get the result that they want. So, oh, it's the warmest, in 200 years. Okay, go back 300 years and tell me then what the story. And they won't.
Yeah, it's a matter of misinformation, disinformation. They cherry pick data, they lie
Mm.
about data, and I'll give you one great example we just came up with recently. It was about ocean acidification.
Oh yeah.
I've got a new children's book that was just published. Chloe the clownfish sleeps well, and so
Right.
it was just
Yeah.
published 2 weeks ago. Just search for Chloe the clownfish.
Chloe the
It,
clownfish. Yeah, we'll
it's
bring it up.
available, and then.
Yeah.
But it's about a clownfish that lives on the Great Barrier Reef, and she's been told that her home is in great danger. And we use this to tell
Yes.
the truth about it. But in that, we also do lesson plans. In the United States, we have a huge homeschooling movement, and
Great.
we've provided lesson plans. And part of this, we looked at the lesson plan that by the alarmists that do it. All right, the biggest one, ocean acidification, that they start out by saying, don't use seawater. Whatever you do for this experiment, do not use seawater because it won't acidify. So at the beginning of the only you have to use distilled water, and distilled
Yeah.
water. The reason is there aren't any of the impurities they're called buffers. The scientific term is a buffering agent, and
Mhm.
ocean water has huge amounts of bicarbonates and various. There's Chloe the
There's
clownfish,
Chloe. Yeah, there you are, folks. Chloe the
and
clownfish sleeps. She sleeps well. Yeah, I bet.
And
Yeah.
so it's part of our Sleep Well series, the first book in that, where
Mhm.
there is such a thing as climate anxiety that children are
Yes,
suffering. And
I'm
so
sure. Yep.
we were able to tell her the story of what's actually happening on the Great Barrier Reef. And so when she finally learns that she's able to sleep at night, and we've got the next one will be Foxy the fruit bat that lives on the Maldives Islands that she's been told they're going underwater in a few
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And so we're
Yeah.
able to we're able to use these entertaining, and just wonderfully illustrated books to tell
Mm.
the story about what's actually going on.
Do you know, Gregory? I have to say this issue of educating our young people properly to understand is so important because in the state school syndrome system, I am sure that they inculcate climate fear
They
from when
do.
they're really tiny. I'm sure they have got climate stressed young kids by the alarmists who control the curriculum. That's why homeschooling, which you guys do in the States much better than we do in the UK, I think it's crucial. to get them
Yeah.
away.
Well, let me tell you, I just returned. We had a team that went down to the Florida Parent and Educator Association's convention, 22,000 people. It
Yeah,
was enormous. And in the free state of Florida, where I live, the
yeah,
Governor Ron DeSantis and
yeah.
the Florida, they provide, I believe it's $6,000 or $8,000 in payments to homeschooling parents so they can buy materials because they're not going to the public school. They're not spending money there. So we're returning some of your money to you. And I think it's
Mm.
a great idea. And so
This.
we were there with our educational materials and just people were they just love us at the homeschool movements.
Mm, that's good to hear. Well, listen, Gregory, we'll jump into the main topic, so to speak. It's all the main topic, really. And that is chemtrails. We're going to talk about chemtrails, and I think I've got a very short clip I want to play of RFK Jr. Talk, if we have it, being asked a question, and we'll just watch this. It only lasts for about 60 seconds, and then we'll come in on the back of it, right? So play RFK Jr.
And my biggest concern is the stratospheric aerosol injections that are continuously peppered on us every day. Bromium, aluminum, strontium, it's sprayed in our skies all day long. And I know you've talked to Dane Wigington about this. He seems to be one of the experts in the field.
Is there a question?
Yes. How do we stop it?
That is not happening in my agency. You know, we don't do that. It's done, we think, by DARPA, and a lot of it now is coming out of the jet fuel.
Yes,
so,
sir.
you know, those materials are put in jet fuel. I'm going to do everything in my power to stop it. We're bringing on somebody who's going to think only about that, find out who's doing it, and holding them accountable.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Gregory, over to you.
Oh, brother. This man is complete. He has no idea what he's talking about. Just think about this. If you owned Delta Airlines or British Air, would you allow someone to put stuff into your jet fuel? I mean, you're at great risk. No, it's not happening. It's just not happening. It would require probably hundreds of thousands of people to be in on this, on the whole scheme, and no one can talk. We've never heard anything. I've never seen. It's just RFK needs to stick to red dye number 40 or whatever it is. But he's very wrong about that. And what we have are contrails, not chemtrails. And we've just written, if you want to learn more, I worked with Dr. Roy Spencer from the University of Alabama at Huntsville to put a report together for us. We published it a few weeks ago titled Chemtrails or Contrails. And we've known since 1918 was the first report that an airplane flying at a high enough altitude will result in creation of contrails. And I think the important thing we need to look at here, what's the byproduct of burning a fossil fuel, in this case, jet fuel. And the simplest way to do that is look at the simplest of all the fossil fuels is methane. The molecule, it's a C carbon, one carbon, H4, CH4, and 4 hydrogen. And when you burn it, it combines with 2 oxygen molecules to create 2 water vapor molecules and 1 carbon dioxide molecule. So basically, it's a clean burning fuel. It produces water vapor and CO2. And so if you were running, but we have with jet fuel, there are a lot of other things that are in it that are naturally occurring that aren't being added. And at least there are some trace things behind, in particular soot. And also it's the sulfate. There's a sulfate that's released, but it's mainly the soot. We need to have something for this water vapor that's being released. Again, there's twice as much water vapors going out the jet engine than there is carbon dioxide. And it's also along with some soot, some very small trace element. And it's that soot that allows the water vapor to condense at the right temperature, and if the air is the right humidity. Very dry air, you won't get contrails. And if you're at a low altitude, you won't. There are things that they do and can figure out where and when you'll get jet trails. And of course, our stealth program in the United States, they've looked into this in great detail, because
Mm.
if you're flying a stealth aircraft, you sure as heck don't want to leave a contrail behind you, because you won't be stealthy anymore, right? You can be able to pick that up right away.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they know what altitude they would need to be to not have contrails. But it's basically, these contrails are the same as cirrus clouds that are in the sky. And these can linger for days, even for 24 hours or more, depending on the humidity and the temperature. And
Well, how do you explain? I mean, I've seen image after image of people send me of you know, formations in the sky. Sort of like patterns, and and the people say, "Oh, I can see the planes have been out spraying again." I mean, it's common. It's commonly talked about, and then there's periods when, for example, COVID, during COVID lockdown, there was basically no flights, or very, very
yeah,
few flights.
and no
And
contrails.
yeah, and no well, yes, nothing in the sky. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you
Well,
would
there you
so what you're saying, Gregory, is that there are contrails, but there are not chemtrails. That's the
Exactly.
difference. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. And you go back, let's just talk about that. You'll also hear that these chemtrails are increasing. They're more and more every year. They're right. They're contrails, but they're more and more every year, because there are more and more planes flying. If you look at, for example, we
Yeah.
looked at the amount of carbon dioxide being emitted by the aviation industry, and we
Yes.
have a very, very good um, lock and know exactly, well, maybe not exactly, but pretty close, how much CO2 is being emitted by aviation industry.
Mm.
And they don't measure water vapor, but water vapor is directly linked with the carbon dioxide. So as the CO2 emissions are going up, so is water vapor, and we know they've been increasing every year because there's more air travel, and so it's just one leads into the next thing. And again, it's these things that are, if you want to reduce contrails, what we could do, and they're looking at it, is to try and reduce the amount of soot going out the jet engine. Because what the soot does is allow the water vapor something to condense on. And that's required for clouds as well. They need something to condense on. But it's these sulfates that also come out, can also be condensate, or can be a
Well,
source for them to condense.
okay, but one of the questions I say we've been asked is, why do the contrails seem to spread out and cover the sky, turning a sunny day into a very cloudy day? Why is that then?
Well, it's the wind. I mean, the atmosphere is not staying solid. If there wasn't any air movement,
Mm.
that wouldn't happen. But
Mm.
these things can spread out in a little bit of wind. And again, it's these atmospheric conditions
Yes.
that
Yeah.
drive. Are they going to form? People say, "Oh well, yesterday there were jets flying over and there were no chemtrails." Well,
Yeah.
yeah, because it was too dry. You won't see any condensate trails over the Sahara, probably, because it's extremely dry.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and again, we go back to the stealth aircraft, and they know a lot about contrails and when and where they'll form, and so they've got a pretty good handle on whether or not a particular stealth fighter or bomber will leave a contrail. Because no matter how stealthy you are, you're still burning jet fuel. You're burning fuel that will end up leaving water vapor behind you, and you don't want it condensing and becoming a contrail.
Well, again, I'm just throwing out comments we're receiving,
Sure.
Gregory, and so I see Ray Burns here says these are not contrails and these are not commercial flights. If it's chemicals, you'll just see your car covered in this dust the next few days. So that's what Ray's saying. So
I've never seen that. I mean, I've never. There are dust. There's dust storms, for example. There's also allegations, and It's true that they say, look at the aluminum, silica that's
yeah.
being. Well, most of the dust, there are huge dust storms that come out of the Sahara that go the whole way across
Oh, they come
the.
up for my way. Yeah, we
Yeah,
get them here occasionally.
right.
Yeah.
And a lot of the dust is an aluminosilicate. It's a clay that's an aluminosilicate,
Mm.
and it's part of the natural process of what's blowing, what's blowing in the wind, and
Yeah,
that's we
yeah.
get a lot of that. And again, we get, um, and that's just it boggles the imagination how people could believe that there would have to be hundreds of thousands of people in on this grand conspiracy. You would have to have airplane and airlines agreeing to do this, to put stuff in their jet fuel. And you think the insurance companies would go for that, with the potential for disaster, to add things to jet fuel? I don't think so. I fly a lot. I've
Mm.
never, I just don't, somebody would report it if this was happening. And
But it's but
we
it's
can
it,
test it. You can test jet fuel. I would love to have RFK do a deep investigation and test every single jet, or every fifth or 10th jet, for this alleged material. And it
yeah.
would kill it.
Because he's the one who made we heard that short excerpt, from what he was saying, and he said his words were clear. It's DARPA. He actually said that. Now, why would he think that if that wasn't the case?
I have no idea. I don't know much about DARPA, to tell you the truth, but
Mm.
it's the fact of the matter is it's not help. It's not. He says it's not Health and Human Services. It's DARPA. Well, again, this would have to be the greatest grand conspiracy. With, again, people just wouldn't stay silent. Somebody would be a whistleblower somewhere. Uh,
Yeah.
and are there attempts, and are people talking about geoengineering and blocking the sun using various techniques? Yes, they
Yeah.
are.
Yes, they
But is
are.
it happening? To some, there have been some small tests. I believe out in San Diego, they tried to do a little experiment with putting something, and there was such a backlash uh, from all over the community, and all of California rose up and said, no, no, no. And here in Florida, there has been a new bill introduced that is banning any future geoengineering, like putting stuff intentionally into the air to block the sun. And people ask me about that. It's okay. I'm okay if they want to do that. It's not happening, and they're not saying it's happening. They're just saying we don't want them to start. Okay, no harm, no
Well,
foul.
you see, I think this is where it all gets so it's quite complicated, because there's quite clearly geoengineering intent and indeed experience. For example, post World War II in the UK, in a little Devon village called Lynmouth, there was a catastrophic flood. And subsequent, after the flood, in the immediate aftermath, the RAF did say, yeah, they had been experimenting in cloud seeding, for example. They said it. So it was a confession. And more latterly, moving on from post World War II, we have the British government proposing to fund an exercise in dimming the sun. I mean, since we'll talk about the British
Yeah.
government, but I mean, that's actually the government
Well,
saying, yeah, we're up for that Bill
yeah,
Gates type plan,
yeah, and there've been attempts over the years, not much anymore, at cloud seeding. It's really for droughts and very dry areas. Let's help it rain. And
Yeah.
it turns out it really rarely works. It's very expensive. It doesn't work very well. And you'll see the nations that are still doing it are some of the Middle Eastern countries that have more
Yeah.
money than they do common sense. And so they're still trying to do cloud seeding. But again, it doesn't work very well. And the only time it does work is if it's going to rain anyhow. And what you can do is add some. Again, you want something for the water droplets to nucleate on. And in the case of jet fuel, the nucleation occurs from the soot that comes out along when you burn jet fuel.
Again, just another comment to read out. In the first Gulf War, one of our producers says there must have been weather geoengineering, because it rained for 72 hours non-stop out there in the first Gulf War. And that was to help defeat chemical warfare. I mean, there is an it's not, maybe it's even understandable. Mankind thinks it can, influence the weather, if not control the weather. I mean, that doesn't seem that implausible to me, that there should be that need. And people like Bill Gates, Gregory, have said that they would like to see the sun dimmed, which is incredible. And the British government seconds that emotion. They would like to see
Yeah.
it as well.
It's an incredibly bad idea.
Oh, it is. Yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
It's
Yeah.
and again, it flies in the face of science that they're even talking about it. They don't understand the historical significance of warming and cooling and how
Yeah.
beneficial warming is.
Yes.
They just don't know it. They call me a science denier, climate change denier. I would call them history deniers, because what
Yes.
they're doing is denying what human history tells us. And human
Mhm.
history tells us we should welcome the warmth and fear the cold. That's what history tells us.
Yes.
And they're promoting this climate porn, if you will, just climate fear that's just horrible. And all of these agencies here in the United States, Environmental Protection, Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, you have others similar, I'm sure, like
Yep.
regulatory agencies there.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
They've been corrupted, totally corrupted. The
Oh, yeah.
scientists that were involved with this misrepresentation, cherry picking, making up data. It's been just awful. And so right after Trump was elected, the EPA fired every single one of their science advisory boards. It was Science Advisory Board and Clean Air Science Advisory Council.
Yeah.
And we were approached not long after that, because we, being the CO2 Coalition, we
Yes.
have nearly 200 of the top experts and scientists in the world that disagree with this notion of a man-made climate crisis. And we were approached. I'm not going to say who approached us, but we were approached and said, "Hey, you guys are we haven't cornered the market on science. We're not saying that, but we have a pretty
Done a lot
good
of work.
stable of men
Yeah.
and women that are highly qualified." And they said, the nomination, and that's what I'm working on today, is when we're done here. I was working on it. When we're done here, I'll go back to doing that. We've put together a list of about 50 highly qualified people. We will be nominating to fill these roles at the two advisory boards. And so that's the power that we have. In addition, something that's really, I think it's pretty cool. It's impactful. It brings me great pride. Just a month ago, we published a new report by Dr. Richard Lindzen of MIT and Dr. William Happer of Princeton, two of the most eminent physicists of our time. We published a report, 47-page report, and we based it, led by our legal advisor, senior legal advisor, Chuck Weller, that we're basing it, that this report, science-based, can be used when it goes to the Supreme Court to fight these, they're overturning regulation over regulation. And so we published that, printed it out with a cover letter, and got it hand-delivered into the hands of Chris Wright, the Department of Energy Secretary, Lee Zeldin, Administrator for EPA, and the other heads of the regulatory agencies. We got it in their hands. And on Friday, and into Trump.
Yeah.
And on Friday, Trump released an executive order. He called it bringing back the gold standard for scientific
Yeah. I saw
process.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
And so this was a month after we provided our report to Capitol Hill. And I'd like to think we had something to do with it. They didn't do all of our recommendations, but it was quite a few, and just wonderful what's going on here. And they're pushing back and they're promoting the scientific method. And what had been used, unfortunately, is indoctrination and groupthink, and they go with consensus science and not true scientific method and argument.
Yeah, because I always look upon consensus science as an oxymoron. The definition of science is surely that it cannot be consensus, because you continually question, Gregory, and investigate.
My favorite quote about consensus was the Nobel laureate physicist, Dr. Richard Feynman, who stated, think about this. He said, "I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned."
Exactly.
And that's exactly what we have here. We're given the answer, and you dare not question us. You dare not speak against climate crisis in this the climate fear that's going on. And that's what we've got. He warned us against that, and that's what we've got right now. And it angers me as a scientist that we have
Mm.
people that should be highly respected, but instead they're spreading disinformation and misinformation.
It's the corruption of science, isn't it? Frankly, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of monies available in the past, for those people who sell the accepted line. And but it's great work that your coalition's doing, Gregory. I mean, it's long overdue, and it's the counterbalance to the what I just see is climate fanaticism as well. It's not just we have it. We were talking about before we came on air. In the UK, we're 100% signed up to net zero by 2030. Right? We're destroying ourselves, and Europe. I mean, how do you see that from sitting in Florida, and you look over the Atlantic and you see Europe and the UK is just as bad, all on this net zero. Like,
Yeah, and it's
what do you
it's
think?
it's Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah, yeah.
They're all in the same boat. In fact, I got up at 5 a.m. this morning to do an hour-long interview with a group out of Australia.
Mhm.
They had a large group of people there that are fighting the same. They're saying the same things you are. Is that their government's just been completely taken over by the climate crisis,
Yeah,
and thank God. Hopefully, we're leading by example here in the states that we're what Donald Trump and his administration, all the heads of these regulatory agencies, what they're doing is incredibly good. And
mm,
what they have done under the Biden administration, Obama and the others, these regulatory agencies were systematically removing the freedoms for Americans to choose what kind of car to drive, how to
yeah,
heat their home, what
yep,
temperature to heat or cool your home. If you
yep,
look around where you are right now, take a look. If you're in the United States, it's everything basically that uses electricity. They've regulated to death, and
mm,
they've made them expensive.
yeah,
You don't have the choice. If I wanted my new dishwasher we got, it takes over 2 hours to wash the dishes, and they're still not as clean as the old one. And
yeah.
why should I not have the ability to buy a dishwasher that can do the dishes and
Oh,
be
great.
done in 30 minutes? I'd gladly pay another
Yeah,
a little bit more for it, but that should be my choice. But instead, my government is telling me what kind of dishwasher choices I have instead of giving me the choice to buy what I want. Ceiling
yeah,
fans, washer dryers. They were going down the road of imposing electric vehicles on everybody, and that was just recently
yeah,
overturned by the United States Senate.
yeah.
They did away with the California waiver, if you will, that
Mm,
California said we're gonna ban all but everyone's going to be buying. You can't buy anything but an electric car by date certain, and
mm,
that was done away with. And that was just this past week. So we have a lot
yeah,
of things. Chris Wright at Department of Energy provided a list a week ago of 47 regulations he was rolling back. In the United States here, we've got they're telling us part of the problems with the dishwasher and the washing machines and the shower heads is they're trying to restrict water flow. And what
mm,
they're doing, it's a one size fits Las Vegas, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Reno. They have a bad
yeah.
they don't have enough water. But
No,
what they do
correct.
is impose a one size fits all policy.
Across the states. Yeah.
Across, we don't
Mm,
have a water problem here in the free state of Florida. We got
mm,
plenty of water, but
mm,
uh, our shower head here, when I moved in, we got a new shower head. There were my son-in-law took a look at it. There were actually 3 separate flow restrictors in that thing to restrict the flow. And if you'll forgive me, the water
yeah,
came out, it was like an old man pee. And
yeah.
he knocked those out. Now it's like Niagara Falls. And it comes out.
Yeah,
That should be my choice.
I
And it's
know.
not like what happens when you use more water than you should. Where's it go? It just does. It doesn't disappear. It goes right back into the system of
Yeah,
more water.
yeah,
And these are things that they've been systematically restricting your freedoms and mine and everyone watching this show. And
yeah.
it's it's really imposition. If you say, well, I'm pro-choice, that means I'm pro-choice of giving you options. You should have the
Well,
right to choose what kind of car to drive.
I completely agree, but I mean, do you? I mean, it seems to me that thankfully, because of the change of regime in Washington, Gregory, with the, obviously, and we're all delighted about that, that these freedoms will be restored upon you folks in the States. But for example, we know in the UK that it's going to be all electric cars from, I think it's 2035. Or maybe 2030. They're going to remove oil and gas as means to heat our homes. We're going to have heat pumps.
Heat pumps. I
Yeah,
hate them.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. But we're still committed. So I mean, do you think that ultimately down this route where you're pursuing net zero to stop to fight the imaginary unstoppable climate change, does economic ruin lie at the end of that road, Gregory? I mean,
Oh,
what
yes.
happens
Oh,
when you go
yes,
down
yes.
that road?
Oh,
Yeah,
you're committing economic suicide. And what we're doing is
yeah, I
freeing
think so.
and we're lifting up China and India's economies because they're mouthing the words sometimes about climate change, but they're not doing
Yeah,
it. They're not going to. They're going gangbusters. And
yeah.
I was in London a few months ago, and I learned that what do you call them? The taxis. What do you call the taxis there?
The London black cabs. Yeah,
London
yeah,
black cabs. So
yeah.
they all had to be all electric,
Yes.
except it didn't work. It doesn't work very well, and they can't get around. And so what I was told is they have a diesel tank that when they get low on electricity, they switch over and they generate. They have a little generator, electrical generator that uses the diesel to create electric. So it's still an electrically driven car. And so
Mm.
they're actually using it's a diesel powered electric vehicle, which is completely contrary to what they were trying to do. And it's
Yeah.
yeah, you guys over there when I was there just it was silly. You know, all the foods were listed as to what your global warming potential is going to be if you buy
Yeah.
this
That's right.
burger here and this. If the carrots
Mhm.
were just fine, it's a very low
Mm.
global warming problem. But don't
Mm.
eat that steak. You're going to cause global
But,
warming disaster.
but the thing about it is, Gregory, it is all of this is predicated on this massive lie that we are in the middle of. I think it was Antonio Guterres, the head of the was the UN or whatever, that unstoppable global boiling. I think it was boiling. He said, and
Yeah.
and, and it's the lie that is destroying so much of humanity's um,
Well,
prospects, I think.
yeah. Let me share with you an example of that, and it's sea level rise. All right, we're being told that all these islands in
Yeah,
the Indian Ocean, the Pacific, all over are going to be underwater in a few decades. And
yeah,
the UN says the Maldives Island is the
yeah.
most at-risk island chain in the world. That by 2050 it will be likely underwater, and it's just awful. Okay, so I took a look at it. I believe the highest point on the island's 14 feet, so it's just above sea level.
Yeah,
And 15,000 years ago, the islands there were also just above sea level. And in the
yeah,
last 15,000 years, sea level has risen 400 feet. Why are those islands not under 400 feet of water, you might ask?
yeah.
Good
Good
question.
question.
And it's
Yeah,
because of a geologic process known as accretion. And if you can search for that, island accretion, two words, and you can look it up. And what happens is the corals around these grow very fast. They can keep up with rapid sea level rise. And in storms, and the actually the greatest amount, 80% of the sand the boy in our new book, the young boys that are 12-year-olds love this part, is that the parrotfish eats the corals, and it goes in one end and out the other. So basically 80% of the sands and gravels around these islands are parrotfish poop. And now you know why the 12-year-old boys think, they go, oh, that's so funny.
yeah,
Parrotfish poop. But
yeah,
it's this, and then during storms, it's washed up onto the shore face, winds distributed across the islands, critters moving around. These
yeah.
islands slowly grow and keep up with sea level rise. And it's been happening all over the earth. And we see too in the Pacific, we see that a higher percentage of islands are actually expanding. some 80% or more of the islands are actually slightly
Yeah.
expanding. They're not being overwhelmed by sea level rise. And it flies in the face. And let's follow that too. In the Maldives, if you Google Forbes and Maldives construction, you can go find it yourself. There are 14 resort complexes that are either under construction or recently constructed. These are multi-million dollar
Investments.
construction
Yeah.
process funded by equity companies and insured by multinational insurance companies that avoid risk like the plague. Would these insurance companies actually insure these millions of dollars if they actually thought the island was going to be underwater in a few years? Heck
Well,
no, there's no way.
I mean, it's a bit like would Obama buy his beachfront mansion at sea level if we were all going to be drowned? I mean, yeah, but as a scientist, Gregory, I mean, it must be very disturbing for you to see the perversion of genuine science. I mean, this is why I think your coalition's great. I love authentic science. But as a scientist, it must be awful to know so many. I'm sure you know lots of other scientists who some of them go with this nonsense.
Well, I don't know many. I'm a geologist, and I think geologists of all the sciences are the most skeptical, and that's because we look
Right.
at the long picture. We don't look at
Yeah.
20 or 40, 50 years. We look at
No.
thousands and millions of years to put this into
Yes.
context, and we knew that
Yeah.
we know that a lot of this is just hogwash. I would
Mm.
use stronger language if we were over a beer, but it's
Yeah.
hogwash will have to do for today. And
Yeah.
it's yeah, it does anger me. It really does. Here
There we
we
go.
go.
The Maldives construction boom. Yeah, I mean, but then again, the Maldives government, Gregory, has managed to get itself some pretty juicy financial contributions because it's sinking. And I
I
mean,
don't blame them. I can't blame them
no,
because
if I
there's
was
a picture.
president, I would do it.
They're standing there in the water with their hands out like this. Give us money. Give us money. Give us money.
Yeah.
We need. They're looking for climate reparations. So
Oh yeah,
I can't blame them. But we can blame somebody like Al Gore or others
oh
or
yeah,
John Kerry that are making money off of
yeah,
this nonsense.
yeah.
And the scientists that are supporting it it angers me. This is not how science should be done. And hopefully under Trump, we're rolling that back, especially
Yeah.
his new executive order on Friday about the gold standard for scientific method is really hugely. It's
Yeah,
wonderful.
that's great. I mean, that's exactly what we want to see. I mean, the other thing is the United States removing itself from the Paris Climate Accord, I think, is also a significant thing because, I mean, that's just part of the climate hustle, the Paris Climate Accord, isn't it?
It is. It is. In some ways, I was disappointed. It was good that he pulled us out. Uh, I wish he would have submitted it to the United States Senate for an up or down vote because it wasn't going to pass, and then it would be killed dead, dead, dead.
Oh, I
And
see.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
because it was a treaty, but it was never approved. And if he had submitted it to the Senate, it would have been soundly defeated because they were going to need 66 votes, I think it was, to pass it out of 100. And there's no way. There's not a Republican that would vote for that thing, and probably a
Mm,
lot of Democrats as well. And
mm,
so they could still go ahead and do that. Um,
mm,
but
mm.
he's done so much good that I'm not going to pick and choose one little thing.
Oh, I think that, yeah, I mean, that's my view as well. I feel with Donald Trump, the good massively outweighs the things that you might question. And there are a few things I would question as well on other topics. But, when you compare it to the Biden years, when you've lived through all those years, Gregory, you saw how science was being prostituted on the back of political ideology. You got to welcome where we are, and I'm sure it'll continue. But on the sort of on the whole kind of the CO2 thing, and obviously when we talked about your book the last time on all the benefits as we talked about that CO2 brings, a very convenient warming, which is a great playing word. And Al Gore's, was it What was his awful movie? Was it A Very Inconvenient Truth, or was it? Is that what it was called? Gore's
Yep.
awful.
Inconvenient Truth. Yeah.
Yeah, the BBC actually paid me to go to see that. You know, Gregory, I
Oh,
was paid.
really?
Yeah, way back in the days before they absolutely banned me. They paid me to go along, watch it, and review it for them. So I did, and yeah, well, after that they didn't ask me about, about doing it anymore.
Well, good for you. You're to
But
be
you know,
congratulated.
you know, yeah. I mean, I just think that the CO2 is, that's what you call yourself, a CO2 coalition. It is that fundamentally important, and I love the idea that you're getting the kids as well now and trying to, you know, stop them being scared of. There's lots of things in this world that maybe we should be a bit worried about, but CO2 sure as hell ain't one of them, is it?
Exact. No, it's not. And
No.
we call it the miracle molecule. They call it the demon molecule. Our
Yeah.
unofficial motto here at the CO2 Coalition is "We love CO2, and so should you." And so it's kind of catchy, and
Yeah.
it's I'm so proud of what we've been able to do. We've
Mm.
seen explosive growth at the CO2 Coalition with membership and with our budget. People are supporting us in record numbers, and just these are just 99.9+% of our donors are individuals that are just giving us a little bit of money, but they
Mm.
want to support us. Every $20 helps. And so,
Yeah.
and we're getting we're getting just a huge number of people that just, and some of them I was reading some of the notes. I'm 88 years old and on a fixed income, and I wish I could send you more than $10. Well, $10 means more to me than a
Mhm.
$2,000 contribution. When somebody that cares like that, it confirms that we're doing something right.
And Gregory, do you get a lot of overseas interest in the work that you're doing as well? You know, from scientists and people
Oh, yeah,
around the
sure.
world.
Yeah, sure. 90 or 25% of our members are outside the United States.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
We've got two employees, one in Brazil and one in India. Our VJ Jairaj lives in southern India, and he writes a lot about the developing world and climate change. He's got a great perspective there on that. VJ
Yeah.
is uh, just
Yeah.
been he just writes. He talks about Africa, what he sees in India, and in Southeast Asia, what's
Mm.
going on with them, and in the African nations in particular. The climate change policies they're imposing on these nations are actually just
Really bad.
horribly hamstringing them.
Yeah.
And instead of they've banned investment in hydrocarbon, any oil or gas developments in these
Yes.
African nations. And
Yes.
it should be something that they can use to build up their people if they could do these projects that can lift their people up out of generational poverty. But yet,
Yeah.
these do-gooders like John Kerry and others, no, no, no. In Africa, they say, and VJ points this out,
Yeah.
you've been using fossil fuels to build your economy. You built yourself up into an
Of course.
economic powerhouse
Yeah.
and now you're going to tell me we can't do it? You're still doing it and we can't do it? What?
Funny, interesting you should mention India, because I mean, I think India is quite enlightened in its own regard in terms of it is using hydrocarbons. It's turning its economy into, I think it's now the third biggest economy in the world. Very, is a superpower economy, and I admire that with India. But as you say, it's a bit of a tragedy for Africa then, because it's actually being stopped from lifting itself up, Gregory, by its bootstraps, so to speak, by using hydrocarbon.
It is. In India, Prime Minister Modi, he
Great.
wants to. He wants. I think wants the best for his people. He wants to electrify the entire nation.
Yes.
In other words, provide electricity to everybody.
Yep.
But there's still tens, maybe hundreds of millions of people in India that don't have access to electricity, and many are still cooking inside their homes using dried dung and wood. And it's leading to horrible amounts of disease,
Yeah.
lung disease, cataracts, things like that, because they don't have electricity. And so he wants to do that. He's got his people in the economy at heart. In China, I think President Xi, he could give a rat's whatever
Mm.
of about people living in the Xinjiang province or
Oh
what it
no.
is.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Right. So he's not out there mining coal and producing electricity from coal because he's worried about he's doing it to help his nation out.
Mm.
He doesn't they're hugely increasing the amount of coal fire production they've got and the amount of coal they're using.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, like when you look at hydrocarbon, the industrial revolution that we had in the UK, I mean, that was basically the British Empire, if you like, was founded on that essential ability to be able to have readily convenient energy when we want it. And now, Gregory, now what we're doing is we're going to carpet over vast amounts of our farmland to turn them into solar. I mean, solar farms, which is not the right term. They're solar factories, aren't they?
Yeah,
Destructive to the environment.
don't use the term farms around me with
Yeah,
solar. Use the
great.
term industrial scale facilities.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
industrial facilities is what they are. And it
Yeah.
isn't it funny too? It's actually not funny, but uh, according to the UN, and I agree with them on this, and when it comes to extinctions, the greatest threat to endangered species is loss of habitat. Well,
Yep.
what's their solution? What's their solution to solve this non-existent problem? Pave over
Yeah.
thousands of square kilometers for solar panels, thousands, cut down millions of trees in order to put up wind
Yep.
turbines. They're ruining the habitat for these endangered animals.
Yeah.
But do that to drill one oil well or one natural gas well. Boy, it'd be
Well, that's
bad,
true.
bad, bad. It's
Yeah.
they're hypocrites. They're complete hypocrites. We don't hear much from Greta Thunberg anymore, unless she's ranting about
Palestine. Yeah, she's
Palestine,
into that
right?
now. Yeah, yeah. I think Greta's moved the gig on a bit, Gregory. She's I think she's sort of shot her bolt, so to speak, on the environmental stuff. But it is a point. You know, they are carpeting over, or they want to in the UK, a big commitment to converting the good agricultural land, horribly then destroying it, disfiguring it, having giant wind turbines on land and in the sea. And these things in the sea as well are very damaging to the marine environment. I mean, what do you think about that?
And we don't really know the damage they're doing. In the We don't know how many birds are being killed. We don't know what the damage is because it's in the
Yeah,
ocean. On the
yeah,
land, we can count the dead birds. And in the
yeah.
United States, it's bald eagles and golden eagles that are
I
being
see.
killed.
Yeah,
And they're given a free pass. 15,000 eagles per year allowed to be killed. And
that's
by that,
terrible.
and
Yeah,
we hear from people that it's their oh well, it's the cats, feral cats and domestic house cats that are killed 20 times as many birds. Yeah, but there's sparrows and robins and things that aren't endangered. If you have a cat that can bring down a golden eagle and kill it, I would keep that cat away from the grandkids. All right.
yeah,
Really. That's
yeah.
one
I feel
badass
that.
cat.
Yeah,
That's one
yeah, yeah.
badass cat. I tell you
That
that.
is, but it's true. I'm sure we've all seen some of the videos that circulate online of the likes of eagles and whatnot being basically chopped up by
Yep.
and it's the most awful thing. If you love nature, I think most of us do love nature. This is the thing. The environmentalists don't get to claim this crown because it's as much you and me, Gregory, and the people watching this that care about the environment. And so we see these destructive things like solar, like wind, and all in pursuance of a false creed, which is the net zero. I look upon it as a cult. I don't know if you'd agree with me or not. I think
Oh, it
it's a
is. Yeah, I call it the climate cult. And that's what
yeah.
our children are being indoctrinated into the climate cult. And
Mm.
those two words, indoctrination and climate cult, that's right on, spot on. And
Yeah.
that's why we're very much pushing forward on our education initiative for children. And we need to reach that and speak to them. And that's what we're actually doing. We're making progress there, and I'm really proud of that. All four
Yeah.
of my grandchildren are homeschooled, and it's
Well, I have four grandchildren as well, and they're not of an age yet when they've gone to school. But I'm acutely aware of the fact that what I see in the state school system is toxic because
It is.
it's completely captured. Like, let's be honest, it's captured. You've got to give them more information. And that's why I love the idea of your books. Actually, I didn't realize that you did those, Gregory.
And this is on the wall behind me. You can see
Like,
my
say that.
granddaughter reading to me from one of our books. It was a painting
Yeah,
done by our Brazilian artist, and so
brilliant.
I love it. I love it. And
Yeah,
and she
yeah.
was at 4 years old. She read that book to me, and only stumbled over photosynthesis
Mm,
and
mm.
what was it? Veterinarian. She couldn't quite get that, but otherwise she read the book to me. So
But
it's really empowering.
but yeah, but and we're just finishing this thing. You know, the young minds, young children's minds are so impressionable, aren't they? You know, they're so open because they're just learning about the world. And the worst thing can happen is if what they learn is essentially alarmist propaganda, which is what they will learn if they go through the state system. And so I think it's brilliant that there are other sources of information and knowledge that can be given to them, and they'll happily read a book. I'm like your clownfish book. You know, they'll read that as happily as any other book. It's
Yeah.
just that you're not going to get that in the state system because that would be going against the grain, I suppose, too much. But
Mhm.
no, I think it's really good, Gregory. Listen, we've gone through our hour way too quickly, but it's fascinating, Gregory. I want to congratulate you on behalf of my audience and everyone who'll watch this and replay and so on and so forth for all that work that you're doing. And with the change of administration in Washington, I think yet again, here's Gregory's books. Do check them all out. Do buy them. There is a change, maybe, and maybe the US can be a beacon for the rest of us, around the world, as we watch what you guys do and your achievements versus the climate chaos which we are driving ourselves into here elsewhere. And if you want to support, if you want to go over and get more information, here's where you check it out as well. Here's the links. And Gregory, so look, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to speak with you again. And I'm glad that things are on the up with you guys over across the pond. Hopefully we'll have our moment as well. But again, many thanks, Gregory. And for everybody watching this, thank you for being with us for the past hour or so. And I'll speak with you all real soon. From Gregory and myself, it's good night.